I never thought my loneliness would lead me to this, standing in my apartment at midnight, curtains wide open, performing my evening routine like I was putting on a show. But that's exactly what I was doing, and I knew he was watching. It started 3 weeks ago when I moved into this rundown building in Brooklyn. The rent was cheap, the neighborhood questionable, but it was all I could afford after my ex cleaned out our joint account and disappeared with my best friend. 28 years old, working double shifts at a diner, and so desperately alone that I'd started talking to my reflection just to hear a voice that didn't belong to angry customers demanding refills. My apartment faced a brick building across a narrow alley, maybe 15 feet away. Most windows had blinds, curtains, signs of life carefully hidden, except for one, the corner unit, top floor. I'd catch glimpses of him, tall, dark-haired, watching. Not in a creepy way, though maybe I was fooling myself. There was something about the way he stood there, drink in hand, that made me feel seen. So I started leaving my window open, not all the way at first, just enough. Tonight I was baking chocolate chip cookies at 11 p.m. because insomnia and sugar cravings don't follow normal schedules. I wore my favorite oversized sweater, hair piled messily on top of my head, flour somehow ending up on my cheek. I could feel his eyes on me as I measured ingredients, and instead of fear, I felt something electric run down my spine. If you're enjoying this story so far, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that like button and subscribe. It helps me keep bringing you these narratives. I glanced up, directly at his window. He didn't look away. Neither did I. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. The cookies looked good. You should close your window. This neighborhood isn't safe. D. My hands trembled as I read it. He'd been in my building, close enough to slide paper under my door while I slept. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt weirdly protected, like having a guardian angel who happened to live across the alley and watch me through windows. I wrote back on the same paper. Thanks for the concern, but I like the fresh air. E. I left it taped to my window that night. By morning, it was gone, replaced by another note. Stubborn. I can work with that. Dinner tomorrow? There's a place 2 blocks down. Angelo's, 7 p.m. I'll be there whether you come or not. This was insane. I knew nothing about this man except that he watched me bake cookies and apparently felt entitled to leave notes at my door. Every true crime podcast I'd ever listened to screamed warnings in my head. But God, I was so tired of being invisible. So tired of eating dinner alone, of coming home to silence, of pretending I didn't crave human connection so badly it physically hurt. I wore my good dress, the navy one that made my eyes look less tired. Arrived at Angelo's at 7:03 p.m. because showing up exactly on time felt too eager. The restaurant was small, intimate, with checkered tablecloths and candles that had been burning for hours. He sat in the back corner, and my breath caught. The dim lighting across the alley hadn't done him justice. Sharp jawline, eyes so dark they looked black in the candlelight, expensive suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. He stood when he saw me, and I noticed how everyone in the restaurant seemed to sit up straighter, conversations dropping to whispers. Emma, he said, like he'd known my name all along. I'm Dante. His hand swallowed mine when we shook, warm and surprisingly gentle. He pulled out my chair, waited until I was seated before returning to his own. A waiter appeared instantly, pouring wine I didn't order, bringing bread I didn't ask for. You know my name, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. That's either really romantic or really concerning. A smile played at the corner of his mouth. Your mail slot is broken. I could see your electric bill when I delivered the note, and you just happened to know which apartment was mine. I pay attention. The wine was excellent. The food that arrived, without us ordering, was even better. Dante asked questions like he actually cared about the answers. Where I grew up, why I moved to New York, what I did before the diner. I found myself telling him things I hadn't told anyone. About my ex, about feeling invisible, about the strange comfort I'd found in knowing someone was watching. That's why you leave your window open, he said. Not a question. Maybe. Or maybe I just like cookies at midnight. You're lonely. The word hit like a slap. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true, stripped of all the pretty lies I told myself. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I blinked them back. Everyone's lonely, I managed. Not everyone's brave enough to admit it. His hand covered mine on the table, thumb brushing across my knuckles. Not everyone turns loneliness into an invitation. Is that what I did? You opened your window on purpose, Emma. You wanted to be seen. Heat flooded my cheeks. And you watched. I did. No shame, no apology. I've been watching you for 3 weeks, and I haven't stopped thinking about you for a single hour of any of those days. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was crazy. This was the beginning of every bad decision I'd ever made. Every warning my mother ever gave me about strange men and trusting too easily. Who are you, Dante? His expression shifted, something dark crossing his features. Someone who should stay away from you. Someone who won't. Dante walked me home that night, hand resting proprietarily on the small of my back. The streets that usually made me nervous, dark corners, suspicious groups huddled in doorways, seemed to part before us. People noticed him, more than noticed. They moved, stepped aside, dropped their eyes. You're not just some guy who lives in my neighborhood, I said as we climbed the stairs to my apartment. No. Are you going to tell me who you are? He stopped outside my door, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. Would you believe me if I said I was trying to protect you by not telling you? Protect me from what? From me. His kiss was unexpected, sudden, devastating. One hand cupped the back of my neck, the other pressed against the door beside my head, caging me in. He tasted like wine and something darker, dangerous. I melted into him, fingers clutching his jacket, logic disappearing under the assault of sensation. When he pulled back, we were both breathing hard. I shouldn't have done that, he said. You should definitely do it again. This time his smile was real, transforming his face from intimidating to breathtaking. You're going to be trouble, aren't you? You're the one leaving cryptic notes and stalking me through windows. Watching. There's a difference. He brushed a thumb across my bottom lip, his eyes following the motion. Close your window tonight, Emma. Please. Then he was gone, disappearing down the stairs before I could respond. I didn't close my window. Stood there in my apartment, lights on, daring him to say something about it. Across the alley, his window remained dark, empty. The next 3 days were torture. No notes, no glimpses of him in his window. I went to work, served coffee and pancakes, smiled at customers, and felt his absence like a physical ache. Had I imagined the intensity, the connection? Maybe I was exactly as pathetic as I felt. Lonely girl projecting fantasies onto a stranger who watched her bake cookies. On the 4th day, my manager called me into his office. Emma, you've got a visitor. Says it's personal. Dante stood in the diner's entrance, impossibly out of place in his tailored suit among the vinyl booths and sticky counters. Every woman in the place had stopped eating to stare. Even Margaret, our 70-year-old regular, looked ready to fight someone for his attention. Can we talk? He asked. I untied my apron with shaking hands. My break's not for another hour. I bought the building. You work when you want. The words didn't compute. What? The diner. I bought it. This morning. You have the day off. He held out his hand. Please, Emma. I need to explain. I should have been angry, offended, concerned about this man who apparently had enough money and power to purchase businesses on a whim. Instead, I took his hand. He drove a black SUV with tinted windows, expensive leather seats. Didn't tell me where we were going, and I didn't ask. We ended up at a park overlooking the East River Manhattan skyline glittering across the water. My full name is Dante Marchetti, he said, staring at the city. Does that mean anything to you? I searched my memory. Should it? It should terrify you. He turned to face me. My family controls most of the organized crime in Brooklyn and parts of Manhattan. Drugs, gambling, protection, construction. The Marchetti family. I'm not just part of it, Emma. I run it. The world tilted. Mafia. He was telling me he was in the Mafia. Like something out of a movie. Except he was standing right here, close enough to touch. And nothing about this felt like fiction. You're a criminal. Yes. You hurt people. His jaw tightened. I do what's necessary to protect my family and our interests. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you. He stepped closer, and I should have stepped back but couldn't make my feet move. I've spent 3 years building something from my father's chaos. Cleaning up operations, reducing violence, trying to make something sustainable. But I'm still a criminal, Emma. Still dangerous. Still someone you should run from as fast as possible. Then why are you telling me? Because I can't stay away from you. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb stroking across my cheekbone. I've tried. These last 4 days I've tried so damn hard. But watching you through that window, seeing you bake and dance and just exist, you made me remember what it feels like to be human instead of just a machine keeping an empire running. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. This is insane. I know. You bought a diner because you wanted to talk to me. I've done more insane things. That building you live in? I bought that too, last week. Wanted to make sure the landlord fixed things properly, that you were safe. Dante, I'm giving you all the reasons to run, he interrupted. I'm dangerous, Emma. People who get close to me end up hurt. There are enemies, rivals, federal investigations. Your life would never be normal. But God help me, I want you anyway. I want those midnight cookies and that terrible sweater you wear when you think no one's watching. I want to be the person you open your window for. I looked at this impossible man, this criminal who watched me with such desperate honesty it made my chest ache. Every rational part of my brain screamed to walk away. But I'd spent so long being invisible, being safe, being alone, and here was someone who saw me, really saw me, and still wanted everything I had to offer. I don't close my window, I whispered. Not for anyone. His kiss was different this time, softer, deeper, filled with relief and promise and danger. When we finally broke apart, he pressed his forehead to mine. You're going to destroy me, he murmured. Good, I said, because you've already destroyed any chance I had at being sensible. Dating a mafia boss, I discovered, was both exactly what you'd expect and nothing like the movies. Dante was protective to the point of suffocating, insisted on drivers, security details disguised as normal people, background checks on everyone I interacted with. But he was also surprisingly tender, showing up at my apartment with takeout after long shifts, remembering how I liked my coffee, asking about my day like he genuinely cared about the answer. 2 weeks into whatever we were doing, he invited me to his place. Not the apartment across the alley. That was just a watching post, he admitted with a sheepish smile, but his actual home in Park Slope. The brownstone was beautiful, restored to pristine condition while maintaining original details. Hardwood floors, crown molding, a kitchen that looked like something from a magazine. Nothing about it screamed crime lord. It looked like a home. This is where you actually live? I asked, taking in the photos on the mantel. A young Dante with an older man who had to be his father. A woman with kind eyes. His mother, gone for 5 years according to the dates. When I'm not working, yes. He came up behind me, arms wrapping around my waist. What were you expecting? Bodies in the basement? Guns everywhere? Maybe a little. There's a gun safe in my office. Otherwise, I try to keep this space separate. His breath was warm against my ear. I wanted you to see where I really live. Not the business, not the family. Just me. I turned in his arms, studying his face. In the soft lighting, he looked younger, less dangerous. Who is just you when you're not being Dante Marchetti, crime boss? Someone who collects vintage records and can't cook to save his life. Someone who reads philosophy and donates anonymously to half the charities in Brooklyn. Someone who hasn't felt truly relaxed in 3 years until you started leaving your window open. He kissed me then, slow and thorough, and I felt myself falling in a way that had nothing to do with physical attraction. This was deeper, more terrifying. This was caring about someone whose life existed in constant danger. Dinner was delivered from a restaurant I couldn't pronounce. Expensive wine poured into crystal glasses. We ate at his dining table, knees touching underneath, talking about everything except the obvious elephant in the room. His business, my concerns, the impossibility of this relationship. After dinner, he showed me his record collection. Actual vinyl, carefully organized, spanning decades. Put on something jazzy and slow, pulled me into his arms in the middle of his living room. I don't know how to dance, I admitted. Just follow me. We swayed together, and I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. This felt real in a way. Nothing had felt real in years. Not the fear or the danger or the logical impossibility. Just this moment, this man, this connection. Emma, he murmured into my hair, I need you to understand something. My world is violent, unpredictable. People die over territory disputes and ancient grudges. I have enemies who would use you to hurt me without a second thought. I pulled back to look at him. Is this the part where you tell me we should stop seeing each other? This is the part where I tell you I'm selfish enough not to. but I need to know you understand what you're getting into. I understand that you're giving me a choice, which is more than most people do." I reached up to trace the sharp line of his jaw. "I understand that you make me feel alive for the first time in years, and I understand that I'm probably making a terrible decision, but I'm making it anyway." His kiss was hungry, desperate, filled with relief and need. We stumbled toward his bedroom, shedding clothes and inhibitions, and when he laid me down on his bed, I saw something in his eyes that made my breath catch. Vulnerability, fear, hope. "I'll protect you," he promised against my skin, "with everything I have." I know. That night, wrapped in expensive sheets with a dangerous man's arms around me, I felt safer than I had in my entire life. It made no logical sense, but nothing about us did. The next morning, I woke to an empty bed and the smell of burning toast. Found Dante in his kitchen, swearing at a smoking toaster, looking adorably frustrated in nothing but pajama pants. "I was trying to make breakfast," he admitted sheepishly. "Apparently I really can't cook." I laughed, kissed him, and took over. Made scrambled eggs and salvaged enough bread for non-burnt toast. We ate at his counter, stealing bites from each other's plates, talking about nothing important, and I realized with startling clarity that I was falling in love with him. The realization should have terrified me. Instead, it felt inevitable, like every moment since I'd opened that window had been leading to this. "What are you thinking?" Dante asked, watching me with those impossibly dark eyes. "That I'm in trouble. Good trouble or bad trouble?" "I don't know yet." I set down my fork. "Tell me something real, Dante. Something you've never told anyone else." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I never wanted this life. My father groomed me for it from birth, but I wanted to be a teacher. History, maybe literature. Wanted a normal life where the biggest concern was grading papers and summer vacation. The confession hung between us, raw and honest. "You could still do that," I said softly. "Walk away." "No." His voice was firm. "I have responsibilities, people who depend on me. The family isn't just blood. It's hundreds of people whose livelihoods depend on our operations running smoothly. I leave, and chaos follows. My father taught me that much before he died. So you sacrifice yourself. I make a choice, just like you're making one." He reached across to take my hand. "But with you, maybe I can remember what it feels like to want something just for myself." We finished breakfast in comfortable silence, but something had shifted. He'd shown me vulnerability, shared a dream he'd buried, and I'd seen the cost of his power. Not just the danger, but the loneliness, the weight of responsibility, the sacrifice of who he might have been. Later that morning, his phone rang. Watched his expression shift from relaxed to cold, businesslike. The Dante I was falling for disappeared, replaced by the crime boss his world required. "I have to go," he said, already moving toward the bedroom to dress. "There's a situation that needs handling." "Dangerous?" "Always." He kissed me hard and fast. "Stay here. Marco will be outside if you need anything. Don't leave without security." And then he was gone, and I was alone in his beautiful brownstone, surrounded by evidence of a normal life he'd never really have. The weight of what I'd chosen settled over me like a heavy coat. I spent the day exploring his home with Marco, a mountain of a man who turned out to be surprisingly friendly, stationed outside. Found poetry books with dog-eared pages, a guitar that looked well-loved, photos hidden in drawers of a younger Dante with genuine smiles. By evening, when he still hadn't returned, worry gnawed at my stomach. I tried calling, got voicemail, texted, got nothing. Marco assured me this was normal, that sometimes Dante's situations took all day. At midnight, I was lying in his bed, wearing one of his shirts, when I heard the front door. He appeared in the bedroom doorway, shirt bloodied, face bruised, looking exhausted and dangerous, and so heartbreakingly vulnerable. "You're hurt," I said, already moving toward him. "It's not my blood, mostly." He let me lead him to the bathroom, strip off his ruined clothes, examine the damage, bruised ribs, split knuckles, a cut above his eye that needed attention. I cleaned him up with steady hands, focusing on the practical, while my mind raced with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. "There was a challenge," he said quietly. Someone thought they could move into our territory. I had to remind them why that's a bad idea. Did you kill anyone? Not tonight. He caught my hand, brought it to his lips. Does it matter if I have before? I don't know. Honesty was all I could offer. He nodded, accepting it. 3 months into our relationship, I learned what it really meant to be with Dante Marchetti. Not the romantic dinners or protective gestures or tender moments when he was just a man who wanted to be seen, but the reality of his world, violent and unforgiving. It started with whispers at the diner. Customers who suddenly found reasons to sit at my tables, asking casual questions about my boyfriend. Workers who treated me differently, some with respect, others with barely concealed fear. I wasn't just Emma anymore. I was Dante's woman, and that came with weight I hadn't anticipated. Then came the first real threat. I was closing the diner late, insisting I could still work despite Dante buying the building, needing something that felt like my own life. When a car pulled up, 3 men got out, and I knew immediately something was wrong. They moved with purpose, coordinating without words. Before I could react, Marco appeared from nowhere, along with 2 other security guys I hadn't noticed. The tension was thick enough to cut. "Tell Marchetti that protection has a price," one of the men said, eyes on me, and his price just went up. Marco stepped between us. "You don't want to do this, don't we?" The man smiled, ugly and cold. "Pretty thing like her? Would be a shame if something happened." The violence was sudden and brutal. Marco and his men handled it efficiently, professionally, leaving the 3 men groaning on the sidewalk. But the message was clear. I was a target now. Leverage against Dante. He was at the diner within 15 minutes. Face carved from stone, fury radiating off him in waves. Checked me over with shaking hands, relief and rage warring in his expression. "You're moving in with me," he said. Not a question, not a request. "Tonight, Dante. Tonight, Emma. This isn't negotiable." He pulled me against him and I felt him trembling. "I told you it would be dangerous. I told you people would try to use you. But I didn't." His voice cracked. "I can't lose you." I moved into the brownstone that night, packed a bag while 6 security personnel swept my old apartment, while Dante coordinated with people I'd never meet about handling the situation. My independence, already compromised, shrank further. But I also saw a different side of him. The phone calls he made personally to ensure those men would never threaten anyone again. Not killing them, he assured me later, but making their lives sufficiently difficult that crossing the Marchetti family would never again seem worth it. The way he checked on me every hour, like he needed to physically see me to believe I was safe. The nightmares he started having, waking in a cold sweat, reaching for me in the dark. "I'm okay," I whispered one night, after he woke, gasping my name. "I'm right here." "I thought I could protect you," he said raggedly. "Thought being careful would be enough. But they found you anyway. Because you can't control everything. No one can." He pulled me closer, face buried in my hair. "I'm trying to get out, Emma. Been working on legitimate businesses, transitioning operations. It takes time, but I'm trying to build something that won't get people I love killed. People I love." He'd never said it out loud before, and neither had I, though we'd been dancing around it for weeks. The words hung between us, terrifying and precious. "I love you too," I whispered, "even though you're impossible and dangerous and turn my life upside down. I love you." His kiss was gentle, reverent, filled with relief and promises neither of us could guarantee. But it was ours, and that had to be enough. The next morning, I met his inner circle for the first time. Men who'd been with his family for decades, who looked at me with curiosity and wariness. Dante's hand never left the small of my back as he introduced me, making it clear without words that I was under his protection, that harming me would mean death. "She's important to him," Marco explained later, when Dante was in a meeting. "First person he's brought into this world in years. Boss man doesn't let people in easy. I'm starting to understand why. You good for him, though. Makes him remember he's human." Marco's expression was serious. "Don't break his heart, Ms. Emma. Man like that breaks once. He don't put himself back together the same." The warning was clear, but so was the affection. These men, criminals all, genuinely cared about Dante, wanted him to be happy. It made the situation more complex, more human than I'd anticipated. Weeks passed in a strange new normal. I worked at the diner under constant security, lived with Dante, learning his routines, meeting his people, understanding the empire he was trying to dismantle piece by careful piece. We had quiet dinners and loud arguments, passionate nights and lazy mornings, building something real amid the chaos. But there were costs. Friends who stopped calling when they learned who I was dating. Family members who expressed concern that sounded a lot like judgment. The knowledge that every time Dante left for business, he might not come back. Living with fear became my new baseline. Then came the FBI. 2 agents showed up at the diner one afternoon. Badges out. Questions ready. They knew about Dante, about us, about things I hadn't even known existed. They offered me a deal. Cooperate. Give information. Help them build a case. And I'd be protected when everything fell apart. Because it will fall apart, Agent Morrison said, her voice kind but firm. Men like Dante Marchetti don't get happy endings. They get prison sentences or body bags. You seem like a smart woman. Which one do you want? I looked at her badge, at her partner's carefully neutral expression, and thought about the man who watched me through windows because he was lonely, who bought diners and buildings to keep me safe, who was systematically dismantling a criminal empire because he wanted a different life. I don't know anything, I said carefully. Dante keeps his business separate from our relationship. That's what they all say. Morrison slid a card across the table. When you change your mind, and you will, call me, before it's too late. I didn't tell Dante about the agents immediately. Spent 3 days wrestling with what it meant, what choices I had, whether there was any path forward that didn't end in disaster. But secrets felt wrong, felt like betrayal. So finally, over dinner, I told him everything. His expression never changed as he listened, but I saw something die behind his eyes. You should take their deal, he said quietly. What? Cooperate. Give them what they want. Get immunity, protection, a fresh start. He wouldn't look at me. I always knew this day would come, that you'd have to choose between me and your future. Dante, I'm not. You should, though. He finally met my eyes, and the pain there nearly broke me. I love you enough to let you go, Emma. To want you safe, even if it means losing you. I stood, moved around the table to stand between his knees, forcing him to look at me. What if I don't want to be let go? Then you're a fool. Probably. I cupped his face in my hands. But I'm your fool, and I'm not cooperating with the FBI, and I'm not leaving you. So you're stuck with me, Dante Marchetti. Better figure out how to live with that. His hands came up to grip my waist almost painfully. They'll use you against me. Then we deal with it together. Emma, together, I insisted. That's what people who love each other do. They face problems together, even impossible ones. The FBI's interest escalated after I refused to cooperate. Suddenly, I had agents following me, watching my every move, clearly hoping I'd lead them to something useful. Dante increased security, which meant I now had bodyguards who had bodyguards, living in a fishbowl where privacy was a distant memory. But worse than the surveillance was watching what it did to Dante. He became more distant, spending longer hours, handling business, coming home exhausted and haunted. The transition to legitimate operations was taking too long, and pressure from rivals who saw his softness as weakness was mounting. There's going to be a war, Marco told me one afternoon, after Dante left for yet another emergency meeting. Other families smell blood in the water, think he's weak because he's got a woman, because he's trying to go legitimate. They're testing boundaries, pushing into our territory. What does that mean? Means violence is coming, Ms. Emma, and Boss Man's gonna have to respond harder than he wants to, or everything he's built falls apart. The war came 3 days later. I was at the brownstone when it started, when Marco burst in with 10 other men, all armed, all moving with military precision. They hustled me to a reinforced room in the basement I hadn't known existed. Concrete walls, surveillance equipment, enough supplies to wait out a siege. What's happening? I demanded. Attack on one of our warehouses. 5 men dead, including Paolo. Marco's expression was grim. Paolo had been kind, always smiling, had shown me pictures of his kids just last week. Boss Man's handling it, but you stay here until we say otherwise. Hours passed in that windowless room. I could hear muffled sounds, shouting, what might have been gunfire in the distance, vehicles coming and going. My phone had no signal, deliberately jammed. I was helpless, trapped, terrified. When the door finally opened, it was Dante. He looked like he'd been through hell. Clothes torn, blood on his face and hands, eyes empty in a way that frightened me more than the violence. "It's handled," he said flatly. "Dante, don't." He held up a hand. "I did things tonight that you shouldn't know about, things that would make you look at me differently. So please, just don't ask." But I saw it anyway. Saw it in how his hands shook as he washed blood off them, how he flinched when I touched him, how he couldn't meet my eyes. Whatever he'd done to handle the situation had cost him something essential. I guided him to the shower, washed him like he was made of glass, dried him carefully, led him to bed and held him while he shook, while he finally let himself break in the safety of my arms. "I killed 3 men tonight," he whispered into the darkness. "Not in a fight. Executions. Had to make a statement. Show weakness would be punished. They begged. Emma. They had families. Lives. And I killed them anyway because that's what the monster I am does to survive." "You're not a monster." "Yes, I am." His voice was hollow. "And the worst part is, I'd do it again. To protect you, to protect what's mine, I'd do anything. That makes me exactly the monster everyone thinks I am." I didn't have words to make it better. Couldn't fix the fundamental impossibility of loving a man whose world required violence. So I just held him, offered my presence, my understanding, my refusal to walk away even when maybe I should. The next morning, I met with Agent Morrison. Not to cooperate, not that, but to understand what was coming. "He's spiraling," she said bluntly. "We've been watching. The violence is escalating. Eventually, we'll have enough for a RICO case that puts him away for life, and probably you as an accessory. I haven't done anything illegal. You live with him, benefit from criminal proceeds, know about operations and don't report them. That's enough." She leaned forward. "I'm telling you this because you seem decent. You got caught up in something without understanding the consequences, but there's still time to get out. What if I don't want out? Then you're going to prison, Ms. Emma, and Dante Marchetti is going to spend the rest of his life locked in a cell, becoming exactly the monster he's trying not to be. Is that the love story you want?" I thought about it all day. About Dante's haunted eyes. About Paolo's kids without a father. About the impossible situation we'd created. About love and sacrifice. And whether sometimes letting go was the more loving choice. That night over dinner, I told Dante everything. About Morrison. About the case they were building. About the prison time we were both facing. "Leave," he said immediately. "Tonight. I'll have Marco drive you anywhere you want. New city, new identity if necessary. You walk away clean. And you? I'll handle the FBI. Been preparing for this possibility for years. Legitimate businesses are established enough to survive scrutiny. I might do time, but I'll survive it. Without me. With you safe and free." He reached across to take my hand. "That's all I want, Emma. Has been from the beginning. Your safety, your happiness, your freedom. Even if it's not with me." Tears burned down my cheeks. "That's not love, Dante. That's just noble suffering. No, it's love precisely because I'm willing to suffer. Because your future matters more than my happiness." His thumb brushed across my knuckles. "I've thought about this a lot these past months. About what it means to love someone in my world. And I've realized that maybe the most loving thing I can do is let you go before I destroy you. You're not destroying me. Not yet. But I will. Eventually. The violence will escalate, or the FBI will close in, or a rival will find a way past my security, and you'll be caught in the crossfire of a life I chose, that you never asked for." I pulled my hand away, anger finally cutting through the tears. "So what? You're just giving up? Deciding for both of us that we can't make this work?" "I'm being realistic. You're being a coward." The words were harsh, but necessary. "You want to talk about love and sacrifice? Real love means fighting for what you want, even when it's hard. It means trusting your partner to make their own choices instead of deciding for them what's best." "Emma, no. Listen to me." I stood, pacing the kitchen. I knew what I was getting into. Maybe not all the details, but I understood the broad strokes. Danger, violence, FBI investigations. None of that is surprising. And I chose you anyway, Dante. I keep choosing you, every single day. But you have to let me make that choice. You don't get to push me away because you've decided I'm too good for your world." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What if I'm not strong enough to watch you get hurt because of me? Then we figure it out together. That's what partners do." I returned to the table, took both his hands. "I love you, not despite who you are. but because of it. The man who watches through windows and buys diners and is trying desperately to be better than he was raised to be. That's who I love. And I'm not going anywhere unless you physically force me out that door. I would never. I know. So stop trying to be noble and let me love you, Dante. Let me stay and fight beside you, whatever comes. His kiss was desperate, grateful, tinged with fear and hope. When we broke apart, he pressed his forehead to mine. You're going to regret this, he warned. Probably, but I'd regret leaving more. We spent that night wrapped around each other, making promises neither of us could guarantee, building plans for a future that might never come. But it was ours, built on honest choices and real love, and that had to count for something. The next morning, Dante called a meeting with his entire operation. I watched from the sidelines as he addressed 50 men who'd served his family for decades. I'm transitioning everything, he announced. Complete legitimacy within 6 months. Gambling operations shut down. Protection rackets ended. Drug connections severed. Anyone who wants out gets a severance package. Anyone who stays does so knowing we're playing by new rules. The room erupted. Protests, anger, accusations of betrayal. These men had built their lives on the Marchetti Empire, and he was dismantling it. I won't force anyone to stay, Dante continued, voice cutting through the chaos. But I also won't continue destroying lives for profit. My father's way is dead. We evolve, or we die. Choose. Half the room walked out. The other half stayed. Whether from loyalty or lack of options, I couldn't tell. But Dante stood firm, ready to rebuild from whatever remained. Was that smart? I asked later, watching the security camera footage of men departing. Probably not. Just cut my force in half. Made myself vulnerable to rivals. He pulled me against him. But it's right. And I'm tired of doing what's smart instead of what's right. The transition was brutal. Rivals saw Dante's legitimacy push his weakness and attacked with coordinated precision. 3 more warehouses hit in 1 week. Key players targeted. The police, pressured by the FBI, raided legitimate businesses looking for evidence. We lived under siege, and I watched Dante age years and months. But something else happened too. The men who'd stayed became fiercely loyal, understanding that their boss was fighting for something bigger than profit. Legitimate businesses actually started thriving. Construction contracts, real estate developments, even a restaurant group. Slow progress, but real progress. I used my position to help where I could. Started charitable initiatives through Dante's legitimate companies, creating distance between the old reputation and new reality. Worked with community leaders to rebuild trust, showing that the Marchetti name could mean something different. You're good at this, Marco observed one afternoon, after I'd successfully mediated between 2 community groups. Boss man chose well. I'm just trying to help. No, you're giving him a reason to stay the course when it gets hard. Makes all the difference. Agent Morrison continued her pressure, but something had shifted. She still watched, still waited, but there was less certainty in her approach. The legitimate businesses complicated her case. Dante's systematic dismantling of criminal operations removed evidence. She was losing her target. You're really doing it, she said one day, cornering me outside the diner, convincing him to go straight. He's convincing himself. I'm just supporting his choice. I hope you're right. Her expression was complicated, respect mixed with concern. Because if you're wrong, if he's playing us all, you're going to end up in a federal prison with nothing to show for your loyalty. I'll take that risk. 6 months after Dante's announcement, the unthinkable happened. The FBI closed their investigation. Not enough evidence to prosecute, too many legitimate businesses to untangle, too much political pressure to leave someone alone who was actively trying to reform. Dante cried when Morrison delivered the news personally, actual tears running down his face as the weight of years lifted. I held him while he shook, while he processed that maybe, impossibly, we'd actually pulled it off. We're free, he kept saying. Emma, we're actually free. Not completely. There would always be shadows, always be people who remembered who he'd been, but free enough to build something new. That night, he took me back to where it started. My old apartment, now renovated into something beautiful, but with the same window overlooking the alley. This is where I first saw you, he said, standing at the glass, where you baked cookies at midnight and made me remember what it felt like to be human. You were my stalker neighbor. I prefer interested observer. He smiled, genuine and light, in a way I hadn't seen in months. I came here tonight to ask you something, Emma. Something I've been too afraid to ask because I didn't think I deserved you. He knelt, and my breath caught. I know I'm not good enough for you. Know my past will always complicate our future. But you've stood by me through hell, helped me become someone I never thought I could be. So I'm asking, will you marry me? Will you take a chance on a reformed criminal who loves you more than life itself? The ring was simple, elegant, perfect, but it was the question that mattered. The choice he was offering me, with full knowledge of everything it entailed. Yes, I said, pulling him up to kiss him. Yes, absolutely yes. We made love in that apartment, where it all began, where a lonely woman had opened her window and found something unexpected. And afterward, lying in the darkness with his arms around me, I felt peace for the first time in months. No more secrets, Dante murmured. No more darkness. Just us, building something real. Just us, I agreed. The wedding was small. Marco and a few loyal friends. No family to complicate things with questions about the past. A judge who owed Dante a favor officiated, and I wore a simple white dress that made Dante's eyes shine with unshed tears. You're sure? He asked one last time before we said our vows. You can still walk away. Find someone normal. I don't want normal. I want you. Our vows were traditional, but the weight behind them was anything but. We were promising not just love and loyalty, but understanding of everything that came with our complicated past. Promising to face whatever consequences remained together. The reception was at Dante's brownstone. Our brownstone now. Music and laughter. People genuinely happy instead of afraid. Marco gave a toast that was surprisingly eloquent, talking about love that transforms, about second chances, about hope. Boss man used to be hard, he said, raising his glass. Cold, efficient, scary as hell. Then Emma came along, opened her window, and reminded him he was human. To Emma, for making us all remember we could be better. I danced with my husband, until late into the night. Watched him smile genuinely, laugh freely, exist as just Dante instead of Dante Marchetti, crime boss. Saw the man he could have been, was becoming, with time and effort and love. Later, alone in our bedroom, he made love to me with reverence and joy, whispering promises against my skin about the life we'd build together. I love you, he said, holding me close afterward. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for being worth fighting for. We fell asleep wrapped around each other. Finally free, finally safe, finally just two people in love, instead of constantly running from the past. The first year of marriage was adjustment and growth. Dante's businesses thrived, creating legitimate wealth that didn't come with blood costs. I expanded my charitable work, using the Marchetti name to actually help instead of intimidate. We bought a house upstate. Nothing ostentatious, just space and privacy and a garden where I could grow things. But the past doesn't stay buried forever. It started with calls to Dante's private line, hang-ups, heavy breathing, nothing concrete. Then photos arrived, surveillance shots of me at work, shopping, completely unaware I was being watched. It's Greco, Dante said grimly, staring at the photos. Antonio Greco. He was my father's rival. Went to prison 5 years ago. Just got released. What does he want? Revenge. My father destroyed his family, took his territory. He's been waiting, planning. Dante's jaw tightened. And now he knows the perfect way to hurt me. Security doubled again. I couldn't go anywhere without guards. Couldn't breathe without someone monitoring. It felt like regression, like we were sliding back into the darkness we'd escaped. Then Greco made his move. I was leaving the charity office late when a van pulled up. Before Marco could react, 4 men grabbed me, hand over my mouth, something sharp jabbing into my side. I was inside the van before I could scream, watching Marco fight desperately, taking bullets as the van sped away. Terror consumed me. This was the nightmare scenario we'd prepared for but never truly believed would happen. I was leverage now, a bargaining chip, probably going to die. They took me to a warehouse, tied me to a chair in a cold, empty room. Hours passed with no one speaking to me. No explanations. Just silence and fear, and the growing certainty that this was how it ended. When Greco finally appeared, he was smaller than I expected. Older, weathered, eyes sharp with intelligence and cruelty. "You're the woman who reformed Dante Marchetti," he said, circling me slowly. The miracle worker who convinced a monster to play nice. Let me go. Dante will give you whatever you want. I don't want money or territory, Mrs. Marchetti. I want him to hurt like I hurt. I want him to lose everything like I did. He leaned close. And then I want him dead. But first, I want him to watch you die. Dante arrived 2 hours later, walking into the warehouse with his hands up, unarmed. He looked haunted, terrified, nothing like the powerful man I'd married. Let her go, he said, voice steady despite his fear. This is between us, Antonio. She's innocent. No one connected to you is innocent. Greco gestured, and his men trained guns on Dante. You destroyed my family, took everything I built, put me in a cage for 5 years. You really think you get to walk away and live happily ever after? I'll give you anything. Money, connections, whatever you want. Just let Emma go. Anything? Greco smiled. Then give me your life. Right here, right now. You die. She lives. Simple exchange. My heart stopped. No. Dante, no. Deal, Dante said immediately. Dante. I screamed against my gag. He finally looked at me, eyes soft and full of love. It's okay, Emma. This is how it should be. You get to live. Get to be free. That's all I wanted anyway. How touching. Greco pulled out a gun. Any last words? I love you, Dante said, still looking at me. Opening your window was the best thing that ever happened to me. The gunshot was deafening, but Greco dropped, not Dante. Blood bloomed on his chest as he fell, confused and dying. Behind him stood Marco, somehow alive despite the bullets he'd taken, gun-smoking, absolutely furious. Nobody kills my boss, Marco said, as FBI agents swarmed the warehouse. Especially not for a drama-ass speech. It happened fast after that. Agents everywhere cutting me loose, checking Dante for injuries. Morrison was there, explaining how they'd been monitoring Greco since his release, had used his attack as opportunity to finally bring him down. You set us up, Dante said, voice flat. We protected you, Morrison corrected. Greco wasn't going to stop. This was the only way to end it permanently. She glanced at me. You're welcome, by the way. Dante held me so tightly I could barely breathe, face buried in my hair, shaking. I thought I lost you. Thought, I'm okay. We're okay. Marco was already being treated by paramedics, somehow still alive despite 3 bullet wounds. Toughest man I'd ever met, refusing to die because his boss needed him. You saved us, I said, squeezing his hand carefully. Boss man saved himself when he agreed to die for you. I just made sure he didn't have to. Marco smiled weakly. Besides, who'd run this whole operation if he's dead? I don't want that job. We spent hours at the hospital while Marco underwent surgery. Dante wouldn't leave, pacing the waiting room, replaying every moment where things could have gone differently. I stayed close, grounding him, reminding him we'd survived. I put you through that, he said eventually. My past, my choices, almost got you killed, and you were willing to die to save me. I think that pretty much proves you're not the monster you think you are. I'm done, Emma. Completely done. No more ties to that world, no more contacts, no more looking over my shoulder. We're selling everything, moving somewhere quiet, starting completely fresh. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Because next time, Marco might not be there. FBI might not arrive, and I can't live with that risk. Not with you. He took my hands. I love you too much to keep gambling with your life. We left New York 6 months later. Sold the brownstone, the businesses, everything connected to the Marchetti name. Dante legally changed his last name to mine, Thompson, severing the final tie to his family's legacy. Marco retired with enough money to live comfortably, finally able to spend time with the family he'd protected for years. We moved to a small coastal town in Oregon, population 3,000, where nobody knew who we'd been, where Dante's past was just a story instead of a threat. Bought a house overlooking the ocean. Nothing fancy, just space and peace, and the sound of waves instead of sirens. Dante struggled at first. Years of hypervigilance didn't disappear overnight. He'd wake from nightmares, check locks obsessively, tense at unexpected sounds. But slowly, with therapy and time and stubborn love, he started to heal. He opened a bookstore. My dangerous, powerful husband became a small-town bookseller who recommended mysteries to elderly ladies and hosted children's reading hours. Watched him transform into someone lighter, freer, genuinely happy for the first time in his life. I worked at the local library, expanding their community programs, teaching literacy classes, simple work that mattered, that helped people without requiring security details or FBI surveillance. We had dinners with neighbors who didn't know we'd once lived in constant danger, went to farmers' markets and beach bonfires, had conversations about weather and local politics instead of territory disputes and federal investigations. It was beautifully, perfectly normal. 1 year into our new life, I discovered I was pregnant. The news sent Dante into a panic. What if they find us? What if my past catches up? I can't put a child in danger. Your past is buried. Greco's dead. His organization dismantled. The FBI closed our file. We're safe, Dante. Finally, truly safe. Are we, though? Can I ever really be safe? I took his hands, placed them on my still flat stomach. This baby deserves a father who's present, not constantly looking over his shoulder. You've done the work, made the changes. At some point, you have to trust that it was enough. He cried then, forehead pressed to my stomach, releasing years of fear and guilt. I want to be a good father, better than mine was. You will be. You already are. Our daughter was born on a sunny March morning, small, perfect, with Dante's dark eyes and my stubborn chin. We named her Sophia, after Dante's mother, honoring his past while embracing our future. Watching Dante hold her for the first time broke something open in my chest. This dangerous man, who'd killed and commanded and terrified entire organizations, cradled our daughter like she was made of glass, whispered promises in Italian, tears streaming down his face, completely transformed by love. Thank you, he said, looking up at me, for not giving up, for opening that window, for giving me a reason to be better. Thank you for being worth it. Sophia grew up in sunshine and safety. Never knew her father had been someone to fear, only knew the man who read her stories and built sandcastles, and taught her that love meant showing up, every day, no matter what. We had 2 more children, a son named Marcus after Marco, and another daughter we called Lily. Our house filled with laughter and chaos, with normal problems like bedtime negotiations and homework help. The life Dante had dreamed of, but never believed he'd have. Marco visited once a year, bringing presents and stories that carefully edited out the violence. He'd retired to Florida, finally living for himself instead of duty. Seeing him and Dante together, laughing about old times with the darkness stripped away, made me grateful we'd all survived to see this peace. Agent Morrison sent a card when Sophia was born. Simple message. Congratulations, you earned this. No signature necessary. Even she recognized we genuinely escaped, built something real from the ashes of who we'd been. 10 years after leaving New York, Dante and I stood on our porch watching our children play in the yard. Sophia was teaching her siblings some complicated game involving pirates and treasure, her voice carrying on the ocean breeze. Do you ever miss it? I asked. The power, the respect, the intensity. Not even a little. He pulled me close, kissing my temple. This is what I always wanted. Family, peace, a life that doesn't require violence to maintain. You gave me that, Emma. We gave it to ourselves. Together. Together. He agreed. That night, after the children were asleep, we stood at our bedroom window looking out at the ocean. Different view from that Brooklyn apartment, but the same feeling. Connection, understanding, love that had survived impossible odds. I'm glad you left your window open, Dante said softly. I'm glad you were watching. We'd come so far from that moment. From loneliness and desperation to this full, complicated, beautiful life. It hadn't been easy. We'd faced violence and fear, made mistakes and hard choices, survived things that should have broken us, but we'd also loved fiercely, fought for each other, refused to let circumstances define us, built something real from impossible circumstances. What are you thinking? Dante asked, watching my reflection in the glass. That opening my window was the best decision I ever made. Even knowing everything that came after, I'd do it again. Even the kidnapping and death threats. Even those. Because they led here. To this life, these children. This peace we built together. He turned me to face him, hands gentle on my face. I love you, Emma Thompson. Have from the moment I saw you baking cookies at midnight. I love you too, Dante Thompson. Even when you were still Dante Marchetti, monster and all. I was never a monster to you. No, I agreed. You were just a man who needed someone to see him, and I was a woman who needed to be seen. We kissed as the ocean waves crashed below, as our children slept safely in their beds, as the life we'd fought for continued in peaceful perfection. Not perfect. No life ever is. But ours, built on honest choices and stubborn love. The past would always be part of our story, but it didn't define us anymore. We'd taken darkness and transformed it into light, taken violence and chose peace, taken loneliness and built a family. And it all started with an open window and a man brave enough to watch. Sophia turned 18 in the spring, preparing for college with the same determination she'd shown since childhood. Smart, fierce, completely unaware of how extraordinary her existence was. Proof that people could change, that love could redeem, that happy endings were possible even from the darkest beginnings. Dad's been acting weird, she mentioned one afternoon, helping me prepare dinner. More nostalgic than usual. She was right. Dante had been quieter lately, reflective. I'd catch him staring at old photos, running his hands over the spine of books he'd read 100 times, holding me tighter at night. He's processing you leaving, I explained. You're his first baby. It's hitting him hard. I'm only going to Portland. 2 hours away. Doesn't matter. You'll always be his little girl. That night, after the children were in bed, Dante led me outside to the porch. The ocean was calm, stars brilliant against the dark sky. I need to tell you something, he said, voice serious. Something I should have mentioned months ago but kept putting off. My stomach dropped. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, but... He pulled out a letter, worn from being folded and unfolded repeatedly. This came 6 months ago, from a lawyer in New York, handling my father's estate. Apparently, there was a safety deposit box I didn't know about. Instructions that if I stayed legitimate for 10 years, the contents would be released to me. And it's proof. Documents, recordings, everything needed to completely clear the Marchetti name. Evidence that my father was coerced, blackmailed into the life he led, that he'd been trying to get out, but was murdered before he could. Dante's hand shook. Everything I believed about him, about my legacy. It was wrong, Emma. He wasn't the monster I thought. He was trying to protect us the only way he knew how. Tears streamed down my face. Dante, it changes everything and nothing. He set the letter aside, taking my hands. Because regardless of why my father did what he did, I still made my own choices, still hurt people, still lived in darkness. His intentions don't erase my actions, but it gives you context, understanding. It gives me peace. He pulled me close. I spent my whole life hating him, thinking I had to be different at any cost. Now I know he was trying to be different too. We were both just trapped in circumstances bigger than ourselves, trying to protect the people we loved. We stood there holding each other, processing this revelation. His father hadn't been the monster Dante had believed, hadn't chosen that life willingly. It reframed everything, added layers to a story Dante thought he understood. What are you going to do with the evidence? I asked. Release it, publicly. Let the world know that Francis Marchetti was more complicated than his reputation suggested. Give him the redemption he never got to claim for himself. Dante smiled sadly. And maybe, finally, forgive myself for being his son. The press release happened quietly, through lawyers and carefully worded statements. No media circus, just truth finally told. The Marchetti name, associated with crime for generations, gained nuance. People understood that circumstances forced choices, that not everything was black and white. Sophia read the articles with wide eyes. Grandpa Francis tried to leave the Mafia? He did, Dante confirmed. Just like I did. We both wanted better for our families. And you succeeded where he couldn't. Because I had your mom. And because I learned from his mistakes. And because sometimes timing matters as much as intention. Marcus, 13 and fascinated by history, asked endless questions about what life had been like. Lily, at 10, just wanted to know if we'd been scared. Terrified, I admitted, but also hopeful. Your dad and I believed we could build something better, and we did. You 3 are proof. That summer, Marco visited with news. They're making a documentary about families leaving organized crime. Want to interview you both. Dante hesitated, but I saw the value. Our story could help others trapped in similar situations, could show that change was possible, that redemption wasn't just a fairy tale. We agreed to participate, telling our story honestly, the loneliness that led me to open my window, the desperation that made Dante watch, the connection that sparked between two broken people, the violence and fear and impossible choices, the love that sustained us through it all. The documentary aired in the fall. We watched it with our children, letting them see the full truth of where they'd come from. Not sanitized or simplified, but real, flawed people making hard choices, fighting for something better. "Mom, were you scared Dad would hurt you?" Lily asked, nestled between us on the couch. "Sometimes, but I was more scared of never knowing what we could be together." "And Dad, do you regret your past?" Dante considered carefully. "I regret the people I hurt, the lives I damaged. But I can't regret the path that led here, to you three, to this family. So I guess I regret my actions but not my journey." Sophia, ever the philosopher, said, "Maybe that's what redemption is. Not erasing the past, but learning from it, using what you were to become something better." "When did you get so wise?" Dante asked, pulling her close. "I learned from the best." The documentary reached people we'd never expected. Letters arrived from families in similar situations, asking for advice, guidance, hope. Dante started speaking at rehabilitation programs, helping others transition from crime to legitimate life, used his experience, both the darkness and the light, to create real change. I watched my husband transform yet again, from crime boss to reformed criminal to advocate for change, each iteration built on the last, creating someone complex and real and deeply good. 20 years after I'd opened my window, we celebrated our anniversary at the same restaurant where Dante had first taken me. Angelo's had closed long ago, but a new Italian place occupied the space, honoring its history while creating something fresh. 20 years, I said, raising my glass. "Can you believe it?" "Barely. Feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago simultaneously." He clinked his glass against mine. "Thank you for taking a chance on a man who was watching you through a window. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible." Our children were grown now. Sophia working on her graduate degree, Marcus studying law with plans to help wrongfully convicted individuals, Lily following in her father's footsteps with dreams of rehabilitating urban neighborhoods, each carrying forward the lesson we'd lived, that change was possible, that love could transform, that no one was beyond redemption. Marco had passed the previous winter, peacefully in his sleep. His funeral brought together people from every chapter of Dante's life. Former associates who'd also gone legitimate, FBI agents who'd monitored then respected him, community members whose lives he'd touched. Proof that a single life could ripple outward, creating change beyond what any one person could imagine. "He died proud," I'd told Dante at the funeral. "Proud of you, proud of what we built, proud to have been part of it." "He was family," Dante had said simply. "The best kind, chosen, earned, sustained by loyalty and love." Now, sitting across from my husband in this restaurant that honored the past while embracing the future, I felt profound gratitude for every choice that had led us here, for every moment we'd fought when giving up would have been easier, for every day we'd chosen love over fear. "What are you thinking?" Dante asked, watching me with those dark eyes that still made my breath catch. That I'd do it all again. Every scary moment, every impossible choice, every time we almost didn't make it, because it led here, to this life we built together. Even the kidnapping, even that, because it taught us what we were willing to sacrifice for each other, proved that our love was worth fighting for. He reached across the table, taking my hand. "I love you, Emma, more than I did 20 years ago, which I didn't think was possible. You took a broken man watching through windows and gave him a reason to be whole. You took a lonely woman desperate for connection and gave her a family, a purpose, a love story worth telling." I squeezed his hand. "We saved each other, Dante. That's what makes this work." We finished dinner holding hands across the table, planning our future while honoring our past, talking about the grandchildren we'd hopefully have someday, the places we still wanted to see, the quiet life we'd continue building in our coastal town. Later at home, we stood at our bedroom window, different city, different life, but the same feeling, connection, understanding, love that had survived impossible odds and emerged stronger. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd kept your window closed?" Dante asked. "Every day. And every day I'm grateful I didn't." I turned to look at him. You were worth the risk, Dante Thompson. Worth every scary moment, every hard choice. You're the best decision I ever made. Second best, he corrected with a smile. First was opening that window. We laughed, kissed, held each other as the ocean whispered below. Our story had started with loneliness and desperation, with a woman seeking connection, and a man brave enough to watch. It had survived violence and fear, impossible odds and constant danger, but it had also transformed into something beautiful. Proof that love could redeem, that people could change, that happy endings were possible even from the darkest beginnings. I'd opened my window on purpose so my neighbor could watch. Hadn't known he was the Mafia boss. Hadn't understood what I was inviting into my life. But I'd do it again in a heartbeat, because that single choice had led to everything that mattered. Love, family, purpose, peace. And sometimes, the best stories start with just a little bit of fearless vulnerability and the courage to be seen. Thanks so much for sticking with this story. If you enjoyed it, I'd love it if you could hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me, what would you have done in Emma's position? Would you have opened that window?